what sort of recipe doesn't call for vanilla? I use vanilla in everything. Hello, and welcome to Mallory's Baking Adventures. If you're new to this channel, I'm Mallory, and I'd love for you to join me as I try out the recipes that kind of interest me most across all of time and space. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to let me know by liking and subscribing. As a new YouTuber, it really helps me out. And if you have any suggestions for recipes that I should try out, leave me a comment down below. So right now, it's the middle of November, and I know that a lot of you are probably starting to think about what to make for Thanksgiving. So today's video is all about my favorite Thanksgiving dessert, pumpkin pie. So pumpkin pie dates back all the way to 1653. It first appeared in a cookbook called The French Cook. So the first pumpkin pie recipe wasn't even American, it was French. But the recipe was simple: torte of pumpkin. Boil it with good milk, pass it through a straining pan very thick, and mix it with sugar, butter, a little salt, and if you will, a few stamped almonds. Let all be very thin. Put it in your sheet of paste, bake it. After it is baked, besprinkle it with sugar and serve. The first American recipe for pumpkin pie, well, really pumpkin pudding, was published in Amelia Simmons' 1796 cookbook, American Cookery. And it goes a little something like this. Pumpkin pudding, number 1. 1 quart stewed and strained. 3 pints cream, 9 beaten eggs, sugar, mace, nutmeg, and ginger, laid into paste and baked in dishes 3/4 of an hour. Since then, pumpkin pie has really caught on as a Thanksgiving tradition. And many years ago, I came across a recipe for a fluffy pumpkin pie. A bit untraditional, but I guess I was feeling a little avant-garde that Thanksgiving, so I gave it a shot. And it was delicious, and I was so proud of myself. I still think about it all of these years later. Unfortunately, being a slightly less organized baker at that time, I didn't think to save the recipe. And every year before Thanksgiving, I scour the internet for it. I found some recipes that seem similar, but they all seem to use gelatin, which I know I didn't use for the original recipe. But this year, I think I'm just going to wing it a bit. Basically, I'm going to take your classic pumpkin pie recipe that you can find on the back of really any can of pumpkin and make it fluffy by whipping the egg whites separately and folding them into the regular pie mixture. Hopefully, we will end up with a pie that has that classic taste, but just with a little bit lighter of a texture. So hopefully it'll be as good as the pumpkin pie I made all those years ago. So let's just cross our fingers and hope for the best. So first we're going to make the ginger snap crust. And we're going to pulverize about 8 ounces of ginger snaps in a food processor until they look kind of like coarse sand. Then we'll add a 1/4 cup of brown sugar and 6 tablespoons of melted butter and blend until well combined. And when the mixture is ready, we'll just pour it into our pie pan and press it into the bottom and sides of the pan until it holds its shape. Mine was a bit more crumbly than I would have liked, but I managed to get it to work. 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon ground ginger, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves. And then we'll just whisk them together. Oops, almost forgot the salt. We're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And here is where we're going to make our deviation from a normal pumpkin pie recipe, because we're going to separate the eggs. And let's take the egg whites off to the side for a moment and add just the yolks to our large bowl. Then we'll add a 15-ounce can of canned pumpkin and a 12-ounce can of evaporated milk. And let's just mix that together until it's smooth. And now we add the spices and do some more whisking. Now let's put that to the side and bring back our 2 egg whites. We're going to whip them up until frothy and then add a tablespoon of sugar. Then we'll just keep whipping up the whites until they reach the stiff peak stage. Nope, not yet. There, that looks good. Next, we're going to add a small portion of the whipped egg whites into the pumpkin mixture. And this will kind of lighten up the overall mixture and make it a bit easier to fold in the rest of the egg whites, which would be the next step. And I think I'm just going to fold this in until no big chunks of white egg whites are left. Finally, we just pour the mixture into our ginger snap crust and bake at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. Then reduce the temperature to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and continue baking for 45 minutes. Then we let it cool and hopefully enjoy. All right, we have our pumpkin pie. I forgot to take a picture or film the whole pie. I got so excited to try it, but you can get the idea from a slice. All right, so it looks pretty good. I mean, the crust is a little rustic looking. It cracked a little bit on top, but it does look a little fluffier and kind of creamier, moussier or something than a normal pumpkin pie. So I think let's give it a try. It's got that classic pumpkin pie taste. The balance of flavors is really nice. You can taste the cinnamon, the nutmeg, the ginger, the cloves. You can taste all those spices, which is what I want, but you can still taste the pumpkin behind all of that, kind of supporting all those spices. Everybody loves pumpkin spice, but when you have pumpkin pie, you really want the pumpkin to be the star, and that's what I get out of this. Now, in terms of the fluffiness, I think it is a little bit fluffier. Less custardier, more moussey, I guess, for lack of a better word. The sugar is right on, and I think it's delicious. Now, the crust, we used a ginger snap crust. I actually really like the ginger snap crust. It got a little burned on around the edges, but maybe we just need to lower the initial temperature a little bit. But the flavor is really nice. It's not over the top ginger in your face. It does give you a subtle flavor to kind of enhance the pumpkin pie. A bite with whipped cream, the pumpkin pie, and the crust. Really nice. So then I guess the question is, what would I do differently? I think I need to bake it just a few minutes shorter. I think I would just drop the temperature, the initial temperature down to 350 and just bake it at 350 the whole time, because I think the higher temperature is there to kind of kickstart the baking of the crust and make sure it gets browned around the top. But since we used a ginger snap crust, I don't think that was necessary, and it kind of just ended up with a burnt edge. So 350 the whole time, I think, is what I would try next time. I would keep all the flavors basically the same. Maybe I would add some vanilla. I didn't realize that the recipe didn't call for vanilla. What sort of recipe doesn't call for vanilla? I use vanilla in everything. So it wasn't until I was putting the pie in the oven that I realized I didn't get out my vanilla extract. But I think I would use the crust again. I might need to perfect it a little bit. I think it needed something to hold up. Maybe it needed to just be baked for a few minutes before to kind of set before I put the pumpkin pie on. But it's a good starting point, and I think we're on the right track. Pumpkin pie is a Thanksgiving staple for many families in the US. It certainly is in mine, mostly because, well, I love it so much. My sister, on the other hand, absolutely refuses to touch the dish, no matter how many times I urge her to just try it again. This recipe in particular is a little bit different than most recipes, and I think in terms of how easy or difficult it is to make, there are some pros and cons. Whipping the egg whites and incorporating them is definitely an extra step, but the resulting mixture is a little bit less liquidy than the traditional pumpkin pie mixture, which made it a bit easier to get into the oven without having a messy spill. This recipe did end up being a little bit more fluffy than the normal pumpkin pie, but I think I would still play around with the oven temperatures a little bit to try to get it perfect. So I think there are some tweaks and changes that I'd make here or there, but I definitely think that we're on the right track to finding the perfect pumpkin pie recipe that will go beyond the expectations of your Thanksgiving Day guests. So, have you ever tried a fluffy pumpkin pie recipe? What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving and you get to eat so much delicious food. Thank you again for going on this baking adventure with me. I hope you'll join me again in a couple weeks for my next video.